back to the Halo mini-series, Episode 2, Part 2, Create Your Talent Factory, featuring David Loiselle, Vice President and Partner at Leadership Pipeline Institute. My name is Douglas Brown, CEO at Halo Consulting, a certified minority-owned executive search firm based in Chicago. Welcome back, David. We're super pumped to have you back for Part 2 to discuss best practices to adapt leadership development initiatives to the ever-changing economy. Before we get started, I'd like to share a brief recap from Part 1 from what we discussed: how to maintain a flexible strategy that supports the changing demands in an organization, how to adjust leadership development initiatives that align with business objectives, the importance of defining various levels of leadership to deliver the right support and growth at each level, and lastly, strategies that organizations can execute to deliver an effective leadership development program that aligns with individuals and professional objectives while supporting the vision and strategy of the organization. David, do you have any additional context you'd like to add?
No, nothing more than just adding that, the different levels of leadership really do need a different type of focus on how they develop their skills, how they spend their time. And so I'm particularly excited today to dig into one of those levels that I think often is overlooked and can be critical to organizational success.
All right, let's dive into the first question. Why is the performance of leaders so critical to the team and organizational success? And what is the impact if proper development of those leaders is ignored or underinvested?
Let's start by defining kind of a leader of leaders. So the leader of leaders is someone who's responsible for managing a team of other leaders. Could be a manager, director, or an executive who oversees a group of managers, team leads, or supervisors. So the leader of leader is responsible for ensuring that their team is aligned to the organizational goals and objectives and that they can execute at their best. The performance of a leader of leaders is critical to the team and organizational success for several reasons. Firstly, they're responsible for setting the tone and culture with their team. The leader of leaders has to embody the values and behaviors that they expect from the wider organization, and they have to be a role model to inspire their team and to follow their lead. Secondly, the leader of leaders is responsible for ensuring that their team is aligned to the organizational goals and objectives. So they have to be able to communicate business strategy, which includes vision, mission, and goals to their team, and ensure that everyone is working towards executing that same goal. So what's the impact if proper development of that level of leadership is ignored or underinvested in, which we find quite often happens? If they feel that their development is not a priority, a couple of things could happen. One, they're going to lose motivation. They might not have the skills they need. They might become a little disengaged from their work and start to operate at a different level, usually a lower level. So their team of leaders might not end up becoming aligned with the organization goals. And if the leader of leaders isn't communicating those goals effectively, the team might be working towards different goals, which can lead to confusion, lack of direction, and can result in kind of lack of coordination and really poor performance for the overall organization. The final challenge with underinvesting in this level of leadership is that their direct reports might not reach their full potential. If the leader of leader is not providing effective coaching, mentoring, and development opportunities to their team of leaders, they might not be developing the skills that they need to perform their best, and that can result in a lack of innovation and poor performance for the entire team.
Great. Let's move on to the next question, David. What role does the leader of leader play in the effectiveness of the entire leadership value chain?
That's a good question. I like the concept of a leadership value chain. Thank you for pulling up that slide there. So the leadership value chain refers to the sequence of leadership levels in an organization, from frontline supervisor all the way to the top executive team. Each level of leadership does have a different set of responsibilities, but they have to work together to achieve the organization's goals and objectives. So there's several responsibilities that differentiate this level from other levels of leaders. First, the leader of leaders must ensure that there's alignment throughout the leadership value chain. So from the top executive down to the frontline supervisor and across the corresponding functions. They're responsible for developing leadership skills rather than technical skills. So they don't need to be a technical expert in their function. They need to know how to lead other leaders. The development of their team should focus on improving skills like coaching, mentoring, goal setting, feedback, for their team of leaders. The leader of leaders has to be able to identify the strengths and weaknesses of their team of leaders and have the skills and be able to allocate the time to help them succeed at being leaders versus just doing the technical task. They also have to drive a culture of excellence and high performance across the organization. So setting the bar for what excellence looks like in the organization. And they've got to be a role model for their team of leaders to embody the values and behaviors that they expect from their team. They have to be able to hold teams of leaders accountable for their performance and ensure that they're delivering results. I think one final and important characteristic of a leader of leaders is that they have to be able to communicate effectively with top executives. So they have to be able to translate goals and objectives that come from the top executives into actionable plans for their team. And then they have to be able to provide feedback back up to the top executive on how the performance of the team is going and be able to make recommendations for improvement up to the executive level.
And as a leader of leaders, David, what am I responsible for?
Yeah, you're really responsible for, I'd say, three things. One, again, connecting the strategy of the organization to the execution of the organization, so kind of connecting those two chunks. But then also looking left and right. So not just within your organization or your silo, but understanding what's happening in other parts of the business and how the work that your role, the work that your team is executing might be impacting different times. You often hear the challenge of a sales team selling a product that might not be ready to deliver, or a sales team selling a service that a service team might not be capable of supporting. And so that level of leadership is critical to make sure that if you're going to sell something, the product team can deliver it. If you're going to sell a service, the service team is capable of providing that level of service. So not just looking up and down, but also looking side to side.
When we think about being a leader of leaders and really playing into the effectiveness of the leadership chain itself, what is the approach to identifying these folks that are the next generation of leaders?
Yeah, I would imagine most of the listeners of this show are going to understand that people often get promoted because they're really good at their current role, and it's one of the most challenging problems to fix with an organization once you put someone in a role and they're not ready. Now, rarely does everyone have all the skills, experience, and capability that they're ready to 100% succeed at the level they go into. But I will say you want to make sure that there is a base level performance with enough level of potential for someone to grow into that role. We call that the transition. And so often people are put into a leader of leaders role because they're really good at managing a given team, but haven't necessarily looked at their skills to developing other leaders under them. And so the transition goes from getting results through your team to how do you now lead a team of leaders to get results through a wider team. And so that transition sometimes takes some time, but as long as you're willing to focus on that. So identifying the skills needed at that level and being willing to invest in the transition or development of individuals at the right level of your organization.
So if I were stepping into a leader of leader role and going through that transition period that you just described, is there a specific time frame, if it's 3 months or 6 months, that I should be able to figure out my role as a leader of leader?
I'll break it into two chunks. I think you have to figure out what it should look like before you step into that role. So really a clear understanding about what the expectation is at that next level. If you're a leader of others, you're interested in taking that next step, your business wants to bring you up, make sure that you have a real clear vision of what that means, even if you don't have all the skills yet. Know what it should look like once you get there. And then over time, and sometimes it takes a lot longer than 3 or 6 months, but over time, begin to build the critical skills you need. And so you may be in a role where maybe you are leading other leaders, but also have a group of individual contributors that you're leading. So you're a little bit of a hybrid role. And so it's okay to build skills over time. But the key is understanding, where do I need to go? And then start working with your business, with your mentors, with your leaders on gaining the skills in order to perform at that fully transition level. And I will say that having the self-awareness to say, I don't know, let me go find out, is an easy way to not make critical mistakes, but not pretend like you have all the answers.
Mm-hmm. All right, David, moving on to the next question. From your perspective, what core leadership skills are required for success at this level?
Yeah, I think there's some real specific ones. They're fairly unique to this leadership level because of the way they have to connect to the business. They're a combination of both technical and soft skills. So, first one is strategic thinking. The leader of leaders must be able to have a strategic mindset and an ability to think and see the business long term. They have to be able to identify opportunities and threats to the organization and develop plans for them. So the executive team says, here's what we have to accomplish. The lower level team has to actually execute that. That leader of leaders has to be able to develop plans to address concerns. Then second, communication. So effective communication skills is crucial for this level of leadership. They have to be able to communicate the vision and mission of the business to their team and to ensure that everyone is working towards the same goals. They also must be able to communicate effectively to top executives, as we mentioned, to provide updates on the team performance. Then coaching and mentoring. Leader of leaders must be skilled at coaching and mentoring their team of leaders. This can't be a casual skill set. This has to be something that they're really good at. They have to be able to identify the strengths and weaknesses of each leader and provide targeted coaching and development opportunities to help them grow. Another skill set important, decision making. They don't always have the luxury of having all of the information, yet they still have to be able to make a strong decision. So a leader of leaders has to be able to make tough decisions, take calculated risks, and achieve those organizational goals. They have to be able to analyze data, even though they might not have all of it, in order to make informed decisions based on what they have to benefit the organization. And then relationship building. This is a big relationship position. So building strong relationships with key stakeholders across the organization is crucial for the leader of leaders. They have to be able to establish trust, credibility with their team and with top executives.
David, I have a follow-up question. For those executives who possess leader of leader skills, such as the strategic mindset, effective communication, coaching and mentoring, and strong relationship building skills, do you have any recommendations on how these executives can continue to sharpen their saw?
Yeah, these are skills that probably are never fully tuned, and so sharpening the saw is the right way of thinking about it. I would say annual reflection, and it might even be more than annual, but going through and looking at where your team was able to execute, and then what role did you have in playing in them succeeding or not succeeding to the level of your expectation. Evaluating where you may have missed the mark to coach and mentor them. Maybe there were decisions that were not made and communicated clearly to a given part of your team, therefore impacting their ability to succeed. And so evaluating and reflecting on the performance of the team and then your role in where they may have hit or missed the mark is a critical step to take on a regular basis.
Awesome. Let's move on to the next question. How can organizations identify if they have leaders who have not fully transitioned?
Yeah, one way is to conduct leadership assessments that evaluate the skills and competencies of leaders. So not necessarily just looking at the performance of the business in that case, but actually evaluating the skills needed in your leadership. And so these assessments can provide insights into leaders' strengths and weaknesses. They can identify areas where leaders maybe need to be developed further. So these could be 360-degree feedback assessments that allow leaders to get feedback from their peers, direct reports, and supervisors. Another way to identify leaders that haven't fully transitioned to this level is to evaluate their performance against key skills and competencies that other executives are delivering in that business. So it's not necessarily a comparison, but you've often heard of possibly stack ranking performance. Doing a stack ranking of performance of leadership capabilities and skills, you can identify who is succeeding in your business and who is not, and starting to model those behaviors. That will help you then develop performance metrics and goals that align with the leaders' roles to evaluate each leadership. So this path can help a consistent process of evaluating the leadership skills within the business versus just the performance skills of the business.
Well said. And before we move on to the next slide, the positive impact of investing in your leaders of leaders is really second to none. For those executives out there who are not investing in their leaders of leaders today, do you have any good resources that you can recommend, or where they should start?
Yeah, the one thing I first think about is not treating all leadership development as a single approach. And again, it goes back to the thought that each level of leadership really has to deliver in different ways back to the business. So many businesses have nice size budgets and a plan for developing leaders at certain levels. And it's usually the first time leader or the leader of others where there's quite a bit of investment put in. And then sometimes at an executive level, at the highest level, there's executive coaching, there's different programs that folks go through. But that middle level leaders of leaders is often neglected. And so what I'd say is take a look at that group. Make sure that you map out your actual levels of leaders, understand what the group size looks like, what the makeup looks like, and then source a specific either partner or solution that addresses those skills that you need. So at the Leadership Pipeline Institute, we do have specific development for each level, and our leader of leaders is our second most popular, but I think the most critical in a way to help them see the unique value, think about their role in a different way, and gain the skills they need to execute for the business.
So David, when we think about different approaches on identifying a problem with your organization, what have you seen successful in your career, and any best practices to share with our audience?
Yeah, sometimes businesses need that aha moment of, oh, wow, this is a challenge within our organization. I do need to invest in this level. And so they have to first ask themselves, do they have a problem with the leaders of leaders? And so one thing we do, and you'll see here on the slide, is we have the business go back and ask leaders of others, so not the leader of leaders, but ask their direct reports a couple questions. What percentage of time that you spend with your leader of leaders is spent making you a better leader versus focusing on things like, technical results or technical skills or, hey, what are you working on this week? But actually spending time developing leadership within the business. Second question is do you have developmental goals on explicit leadership skills? So have you already begun to invest in the leader of others and leader of leaders with developmental goals on explicit leadership skills? And then finally, are you actually being held accountable for leadership capabilities? If you look at if you were to say, do I earn my bonus this year, and what do I earn my bonus on this year? If the 10 items that you earn a bonus on, none of them are addressing leadership capabilities, you may not have the right level of investment in the success of leaders.
That's an interesting point. And when we think about developmental goals on explicit leadership skills, how is that directly affected by the leadership capabilities and being held accountable?
Yeah, it's a good point. You have to connect them, right? So just like any performance management process, this would be, setting a time where you say, here are the expectations over the next quarter, over the next 6 months, over the next year. And often those are deliverables related to the business. But at this level, there also needs to be goals and expectations set around capabilities of leadership. So we improving regular coaching of your team over the course of the next 3 months, or setting goals and objectives that are clear and aligned to our business objectives for your team, putting out those leadership objectives, and then if individuals are not able to deliver on those, setting developmental plans to help people learn how to coach, set business objectives, communicate clearly in all directions, and similar skills like that.
The last question that we want to wrap up with, David, what steps can our listeners take to better define the role of a leader of leaders and enable their ability to shift their mindset, allocate time towards leading and developing the right skills to enable a competitive advantage through their leadership?
There's a few ways to approach this, but one way may be to look at the role's unique value rather than the group, rather than to group it in with all leadership roles, as I mentioned. So you can do this in a couple ways. First, you want to define the role. This is defining the role at your organization, or defining the level, even more importantly. So what does the role of a leader of leaders need to do within your organization? You have to understand their responsibilities, their accountabilities, their expectations. A well-defined role will provide clarity and direction for the leader of leaders, enabling them to focus on what's most important. Once you know the responsibilities, focusing on developing the skills needed for success at the leader of leaders level. So this could include programs, workshops, coaching sessions, mentorship, and other developmental opportunities. I'd also suggest that you encourage a growth mindset at this level, meaning not expecting every leader of leaders to know everything from day one, but encouraging everyone at that level to want to grow, to be open to learning and development. Encourage leaders to seek out new challenges, take risks, and embrace failure as an opportunity to learn and grow. Then you have to allocate time toward leading. And so sometimes people get caught up in running the business. It's essential that the leader of leaders allocates time towards their leading of others. So this means setting aside time for coaching, mentoring, developing their team. It also means delegating responsibilities and empowering their team to make decisions, so you as the leader of leaders aren't involved in every aspect of the business. Finally, it's important to measure and evaluate the success of your leader leaders as a company. This can be done through performance metrics that we mentioned, feedback from direct reports and peers, so 360, and evaluations of their impact on the organization's overall success.
David, as we conclude, any last comments, advice, or thoughts you'd like to share with our listeners?
Yeah, I'll say that this level of leadership being underinvested in is fairly common, and I think if you think of leadership development as a culture versus an independent activity, it will help individuals in your organization realize they have a role in being developed within your organization. So that culture of leadership will provide opportunities for training, mentorship, and development programs. And when leadership is valued and it's encouraged at all levels of the organization, it does create a culture of growth and improvement that drives success.
Well said. We appreciate everyone tuning into part 2 of our Halo mini series, Create Your Talent Factory. Don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button and sign up for our monthly newsletter, the Halo Content Hub via LinkedIn, which summarizes current market trends and recaps past events. David, thank you so much for joining us today on the Halo mini series, and we look forward to staying connected.
Thanks, Doug. See you all soon.